At my grandson Leo's welcome dinner, my daughter-in-law Scarlett raised a glass. She publicly accused me of being a controlling matriarch, obsessed with family money, while my son, Michael, stood silently by. I just smiled, then took the microphone. "Thank you for that honest toast, Scarlett," I began, ready to reveal the true inheritance, shattering her carefully constructed facade. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. Eleanor, at 61, moved through her spacious home with a quiet grace, her hands meticulously arranging a centerpiece of fresh hydrangeas. Every detail, from the polished antique dining table to the soft glow of the lamps, was perfect. This evening was for baby Leo, her grandson, and in a deeper sense, it was a tribute to Arthur, her late husband. She imagined his approving smile, his gentle hand on her shoulder, as she put the finishing touches on the welcoming dinner. Arthur had loved family gatherings, and his spirit still felt palpable in these rooms. The house hummed with an expectant warmth, a stark contrast to the quiet ache in Eleanor's heart for the man who was no longer there to share these joys. She cherished Leo as a living continuation of Arthur's legacy, a new branch on their family tree. The doorbell chimed, pulling her from her reverie. A deep breath, a quick check in the mirror, and Eleanor opened the door, a genuine smile gracing her lips. Michael stood there, holding a bundled Leo, his face alight with a new father's pride. Beside him, Scarlett offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod. "Welcome, dear ones," Eleanor said, her voice soft with emotion. Scarlett, however, barely met Eleanor's gaze, immediately passing the baby to Michael with an exaggerated sigh, as if the child were a burden. Eleanor's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her attention firmly fixed on her grandson. She reached out, gently stroking Leo's tiny hand, a rush of pure love washing over her. The initial hours of the dinner unfolded pleasantly, or as pleasantly as it could be with Scarlett's underlying tension. The conversation revolved mostly around Leo, his adorable coos, his tiny fingers, his surprising strength. Michael glowed, happy to share stories of fatherhood, and the other guests, mostly close family friends and relatives, indulged him with warmth and genuine interest. Eleanor watched, a quiet contentment settling over her, finding solace in the joy of her son and grandson. However, as the evening progressed and dessert was served, a shift in atmosphere became palpable. George, a longtime friend of the family and Arthur's closest confidant, raised his glass. "To Eleanor," he began, his voice warm, "the steadfast matriarch of this family. She has held us together, nurtured us with love and wisdom, and preserved the heart of our home even through the toughest times. We are all so grateful for her enduring strength." A chorus of agreements and clinking glasses followed. Eleanor felt a blush rise, touched by George's words, but then she caught Scarlett's eye. Her daughter-in-law's face had darkened, a barely concealed scowl twisting her features, her earlier strained politeness vanishing completely. Then, with an abruptness that made several people jump, Scarlett stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the polished floor. A hush fell over the table. Clutching her wine glass, she held it aloft, her eyes fixed on Eleanor with an icy glare. "And to Eleanor," Scarlett began, her voice dripping with venom, sharp and cold like shards of glass. "The matriarch who tries to control every aspect of this family's life and cling to every cent of the family money." The words hung in the air, a raw, brutal accusation. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Forks clattered, conversations died. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between his wife and his mother, but he remained silent, offering no defense, no rebuke to Scarlett. Eleanor felt the sting of Scarlett's words, but Michael's silence was a deeper wound. It was the final straw in a long series of slights and manipulations. A quiet resolve settled within her. Enough. She had tolerated Scarlett's bitterness for too long, endured her insidious attempts to isolate Michael from his own family, all in the name of peace. But there would be no more peace, not until the truth was laid bare. With a slow, deliberate movement, Eleanor rose from her seat. Her eyes met Scarlett's, unyielding. Then, to the astonishment of everyone, she walked over to the head of the table and took the microphone that had been set up earlier for Leo's video slideshow. Her voice, when it came, was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Thank you for that honest toast, Scarlett. Eleanor said, a hint of steel beneath the soft words. It truly clarifies things. Since honesty is now on the table, I believe it's time for me to reveal some truths of my own, the truth about the inheritance. A ripple of murmuring went through the guests. Michael looked up, his face etched with confusion. Eleanor turned to face the room, her gaze sweeping over the astonished faces. Arthur, my late husband, was a man of great foresight and immense love for his family. He established a very specific trust fund. It was designed not for lavish spending or fleeting whims, but to secure Michael's future and, more importantly, to ensure Leo's education and financial stability. Her eyes landed back on Scarlett. It was certainly not created for designer purses or the luxury car you've been eyeing, Scarlett. The air crackled with tension. Scarlett's face, initially defiant, slowly contorted in a mixture of shock and incandescent rage. As Eleanor continued, since your wedding day, Scarlett, you have systematically attempted to find ways to bypass the very carefully constructed conditions of that trust. The wine glass in Scarlett's hand slipped. With a sickening crunch, it shattered on the floor, red wine spreading like a dark stain across the pristine white rug. What are you talking about, Mom? Michael's voice was sharp, laced with genuine confusion and a dawning realization. Eleanor didn't flinch. I'm talking about hidden bank statements, Michael, and credit card bills that detail spending far beyond what you both could reasonably afford and certainly outside the parameters of Arthur's intentions for the trust. She's lying. Scarlett, I shrieked, her voice high and panicked. She's manipulating you just like she always does. She's always hated me. Her face was a mask of furious denial, but the frantic darting of her eyes, the desperate tremor in her hands, betrayed her. George, ever the gentleman, stepped forward. Perhaps, he said gently, addressing the stunned guests, it would be best if we all took our leave. This seems to be a private family matter. The guests, relieved to escape the suffocating tension, quickly gathered their belongings and made their excuses, a flurry of polite but hurried goodbyes. Within minutes, only Eleanor, Michael, and Scarlett remained in the suddenly cavernous dining room. The shattered glass and wine stain, a stark testament to the shattered peace. As the door clicked shut behind the last guest, Scarlett's anger erupted, unfettered. You miserable old witch, she spat, advancing on Eleanor. You've hated me from day one, haven't you? You just couldn't stand that Michael chose me. Eleanor remained unmoving, her calm a sharp counterpoint to Scarlett's fury. I did not hate you, Scarlett, she said, her voice steady. I merely saw your true colors. I saw how you systematically drove a wedge between Michael and me, through a litany of lies and fabricated emergencies. Every holiday, every family gathering, there was always some crisis, some excuse to keep Michael away, some seed of doubt planted about my intentions. She remembered countless instances, evenings Michael would suddenly cancel, claiming Scarlett is unwell, or a sudden urgent trip out of town. Do you remember, Michael, Eleanor continued, turning to her son, whose face was a study in bewilderment and distress, when you mentioned Scarlett told you I had questioned your spending habits, implying I disapproved of how you managed your finances? The silence in the dining room, thick with unspoken accusations and simmering anger, was broken only by the soft gurgle of baby Leo in Michael's arms. Eleanor turned her full attention to her son, her gaze gentle but firm. Michael, she began, her voice a low, steady current in the agitated air. Have you seen the credit card statements lately? Really looked at them? Michael blinked, still reeling from Scarlett's outburst and Eleanor's earlier revelations. I haven't, Mom. Scarlett handles most of that. She said she'd set up auto pay and everything was fine. His eyes flickered towards Scarlett, who stood rigid, her face a mask of wounded indignation. Eleanor walked purposefully to an antique sideboard, a piece Arthur had cherished. From one of its meticulously organized drawers, she pulled out a slim manila folder. The simple object seemed to hum with concealed truths. I thought as much, she said, her voice devoid of triumph, only a quiet sorrow, which is why I took the liberty of looking into it. She held up the folder, its contents copies of Michael's financial statements for the past year. You see, Michael, she continued, her gaze unwavering as she looked at her son, The trust Arthur set up for you and Leo, it's not just about funds. It includes a sophisticated fraud alert system designed to protect your assets. It's why I was notified when certain unusual activities began to occur. Specifically, she paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Scarlett has been opening credit cards in your name. The accusation hung in the air, a bell tolling the end of an illusion. Scarlett's composure snapped. This is an invasion of privacy, she shrieked, lunging forward as if to snatch the folder from Eleanor. You had no right. You can't just go digging through our personal finances. Her voice was shrill, laced with a desperate panic that belied her furious protest. Eleanor held the folder steady, her grip firm. I had every right as the trustee of Arthur's estate, she countered calmly, her voice a soothing balm against Scarlett's hysteria, yet unwavering in its authority. My responsibility is to protect you, Michael, and more importantly, to protect Leo's future. That means protecting his inheritance from any form of financial impropriety or reckless spending that could jeopardize his future security. She met Scarlett's furious glare with a steady, unflinching gaze. Michael's hands, which had been gently stroking Leo's back, began to tremble. His eyes, wide with disbelief, were fixed on the folder in his mother's hand. He reached out, his fingers fumbling slightly, and Eleanor passed it to him. As he opened it, the neatly organized stack of statements and highlighted entries became a damning testament to Scarlett's deceit. His expression shifted rapidly, from utter bewilderment to a slow, burning anger that tightened his jaw. His eyes scanned the pages, his breathing growing shallow. A sharp intake of breath escaped him. What is this? He whispered, his voice hoarse, pointing a trembling finger at one particular entry. 5,000 at Nordstrom? And a 3,000 charge at that boutique on Elm Street? Scarlett, what is this? We agreed to save for the baby. Every penny. His voice rose with each question, disbelief giving way to a raw sense of betrayal. Scarlett, despite her earlier panic, seemed to regain a veneer of defiance. She tossed her head, her eyes flashing. I needed those things, Michael. Do you expect me to look like a pauper, especially with your mother constantly judging me? What was I supposed to do? Wear rags while carrying your child? Her words were a desperate attempt to deflect, to shift the blame back onto Eleanor and her own perceived victimhood. Michael, however, was no longer listening to her theatrics. His eyes were glued to the folder, flipping through the pages with increasing urgency. Then he froze. His face went utterly pale, his eyes wide with a new, deeper shock. What is this account? He murmured, pointing to an unfamiliar statement. I never opened this. This isn't mine. This isn't. The implications of an entirely separate, unauthorized account opened in his name were beginning to sink in. Your mother is trying to manipulate you, Michael. Scarlett cried out, seeing the truth crumbling around her. She's always hated me, always wanted to control you. She's doing this to drive us apart, don't you see? She tried to inject a note of desperate sincerity into her voice, but it was lost in the shrillness of her tone. Eleanor calmly interjected, her voice cutting through Scarlett's frantic accusations. This isn't about whether you're good enough, Scarlett. This isn't about me hating you. This is about the lies you've told, the trust you've systematically broken, and the damage you've done, not just to Michael's finances, but to his peace of mind and to the sanctity of our family. Michael looked up, his face a mask of profound pain. He was no longer just confused. He was shattered. Over 30,000, he whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes wide and vacant. Over 30,000 in debt I knew nothing about. How could you do this, Scarlett? How could you do this to us? To me. His grip on the folder tightened, the papers crinkling under the pressure. Scarlett's tactics shifted instantly. Her defiant anger vanished, replaced by an astonishingly swift transition to feigned remorse. Her eyes welled with tears, her lower lip began to tremble. Danny, she whimpered, using a pet name she knew still held some sway over him. She reached out a trembling hand, trying to touch his arm. I was going to tell you. I really was. But with the baby coming, and all the stress, I didn't want to worry you. I just wanted to make things perfect for us, for Leo. I got a little carried away, that's all. I was gonna pay it back, I swear. Her voice was soft, laced with a calculated vulnerability. Eleanor watched the performance with a heavy heart, knowing exactly what Scarlett was doing. "The debt isn't even the worst part, Michael," she said, her voice firm, cutting through Scarlett's manipulative plea. "It's the lying, the systematic manipulation. The way she's tried to turn you against me, against your own family for her own selfish gains. The way she's isolated you." As if sensing the profound emotional upheaval, baby Leo, who had been sleeping peacefully in Michael's arms, began to stir, then let out a wail, his small face scrunching up in distress. Michael, still pale and reeling, instinctively rocked his son, trying to soothe him, but his eyes remained fixed on Eleanor, searching. The full weight of his wife's betrayal, coupled with his mother's painful revelations, seemed to crush him. He looked utterly lost. "Mom," he finally asked, his voice raw with a newfound vulnerability, "what else haven't you told me?" The days that followed the disastrous dinner were eerily quiet. Eleanor moved through her home in a haze, the comfortable silence now feeling heavy with unspoken words. While a part of her felt a grim satisfaction at finally exposing Scarlett, a deeper part was consumed by doubt. Had she gone too far? Had she irrevocably damaged her relationship with Michael, her only son, for the sake of an inheritance that should have been a source of security, not conflict? The shattered glass and wine stain remained on the rug, a stark reminder of the evening's unraveling. On the fourth day, a familiar car pulled into her driveway. Michael, alone. Eleanor's heart both ached and soared. He looked utterly exhausted, his shoulders slumped, dark circles under his eyes. He walked into the house, bypassing the usual pleasantries, his face a grim mask of weary despair. "Mom," he said, his voice raspy, "I found more." He sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Almost 50,000 total debt. Not just the credit cards you showed me, but lines of credit, even a personal loan, all in my name, all without my knowledge." Eleanor listened, her stomach clenching. She simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his pain. He reached into his messenger bag, pulling out another item. This was a glossy real estate listing for Eleanor's own family home, the very house they were sitting in. Her breath caught in her throat. On the margins, in Scarlett's familiar, looped handwriting, were meticulous notes detailing potential selling prices, renovation estimates, and projected profits. "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered, though a cold wave of comprehension was already washing over her. She suddenly saw Scarlett's earlier, seemingly benign comments about the house being too big for one person, and how selling it would provide a nest egg for Leo's future. It wasn't concern, it was a carefully constructed plan. Michael's voice was strained. "And then there's this." He scrolled through his phone, presenting a series of text messages. They were exchanges between Scarlett and a local real estate agent, detailing plans to list the family's beloved Tahoe cabin. The cabin, a place of cherished memories, a sanctuary for Arthur, was an integral part of his trust, specifically earmarked for family use in future generations. "She can't sell that, Michael," Eleanor stated firmly, her voice regaining its strength. "It's in the trust. It's protected." Michael looked up, his eyes filled with a fresh wave of despair. "She knows that, Mom. She's been consulting lawyers for months, trying to find loopholes, ways to challenge the trust. She even tried to argue that Arthur wasn't of sound mind when he set it up." A wave of profound vindication, bittersweet and heavy, washed over Eleanor. Arthur. Dear, wise Arthur. He had known. He had seen something, sensed something, long before she had. His careful, almost meticulous arrangement of the trust, the intricate layers of protection he'd built, weren't just for their future. They were specifically designed to guard against avarice, against manipulation. He had been right, painfully, heartbreakingly right. Then Michael produced the most shocking discovery of all. His voice was barely audible as he held up another document, a printout from his computer. It was a draft letter. To a lawyer. This is a draft letter," he stammered, his face ashen, "about declaring you incompetent to gain power of attorney." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp, piercing through Eleanor's defenses. Incompetent to gain power of attorney. Scarlett wasn't just after money, she was after control. She was plotting to seize everything Arthur and Eleanor had built over 40 years of hard work and shared dreams. Not just the financial assets, but the very essence of their legacy, their autonomy. The casual slights, the subtle digs, the manufactured emergencies, it all clicked into place, revealing a chillingly calculated scheme. Eleanor felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Her mind raced, processing the enormity of Scarlett's betrayal. But before she could fully descend into the abyss of her thoughts, Michael interrupted, his voice thick with raw guilt. "Mom," he choked out, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, "I don't apologize for her. I'm the one who should be sorry. I believed her. I let her do this. I let her come between us." Eleanor reached out, gently placing her hand on his arm. His skin was cold. "No, Michael," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Don't say that. You loved her. You trusted her. That's what you're supposed to do with the person you marry. You're supposed to believe in them. Her betrayal is hers, not yours." "But I abandoned you after Dad died," Michael whispered. His head bowed, shame etched on his features. "When you needed me most, I let her pull me away." "You're here now, Michael," Eleanor said, squeezing his arm gently. "That's what matters. You see the truth. That's what matters." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of hope amidst the profound pain. "What do I do now, Mom?" he asked, his voice fragile. "Lost?" "There's Leo to think about." "What about Leo?" The mention of his son seemed to anchor him, a desperate plea for guidance. Just then, the sharp slam of a car door echoed from outside. Eleanor and Michael both froze, their heads snapping towards the sound. Through the living room window, they saw her. Scarlett. She marched up the walkway, her face set in a defiant scowl, baby Leo clutched in her arms. She had followed Michael. A profound shift occurred in Michael. His slumped shoulders straightened, his jaw tightened with a resolve Eleanor hadn't seen in him since Arthur's passing. He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the front door. He turned back to Eleanor, his eyes clear and firm. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything," he said, his voice steady now. "But I promise you it ends today." With that, he walked towards the door, his steps firm, and opened it to Scarlett. The moment Michael opened the door, Charlotte burst in, a whirlwind of furious energy and accusation. Baby Leo, clutched tightly in her arms, began to fuss, his tiny cries cutting through the tense air. "So," Scarlett hissed, her eyes blazing, fixed on Michael. "This is what you do, is it? Sneak around behind my back, conspiring with your mother, trying to ruin my life." Michael held up a hand, trying to calm her. His voice was firm, though tinged with the sadness of a man facing an undeniable truth. "Scarlett, please lower your voice. You're upsetting Leo." He gestured towards the whimpering baby, whose small face was now red and contorted. But Scarlett was beyond reason. "Don't you dare try to tell me what to do, Michael. Not after what you've done." "What I've done?" Michael's voice hardened. He stepped fully into the confrontation, no longer the bewildered son, but a man betrayed. "What I've done is find the truth about the credit cards, about the debt, about the plans to sell Mom's house, the house she's lived in her entire life, a house full of Arthur's memories." Scarlett tried to interject, to deflect, her mouth opening to spew another stream of excuses and blame. But Michael cut her off, his voice rising, imbued with a newfound authority. "No, Scarlett, don't even try to twist this. I found everything myself, the statements hidden in your old boxes, the messages to the real estate agent, on your burner phone. And yes," he paused, his gaze unwavering, "the draft letter to the lawyer about getting power of attorney over my mother, to declare her incompetent. All for her money." Scarlett gasped, a sound of feigned outrage. "You went through my things," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the now silent room. "You invaded my privacy. That's illegal." Michael scoffed, a bitter, humorless honesty. "Our privacy, Scarlett. Our finances. Our marriage. Our future. His future." He gestured with his head towards Leo, who continued to whimper, burying his face in Scarlett's shoulder. "You didn't care about my privacy when you opened those accounts in my name. You didn't care about our marriage when you racked up tens of thousands in debt. And you certainly didn't care about Leo's future when you tried to steal his trust fund." Scarlett's face crumpled, her anger morphing into her familiar victim act. Tears sprang to her eyes, though no actual tears fell. You don't understand, Michael. Your mother. She's always been against me. Always. She's just holding on to that money like it's hers, never wanting us to have anything. It's not about the money, Scarlett, Michael roared, his control finally snapping. His voice boomed, startling Leo, who let out a fresh, piercing cry. It's about the lying, the manipulation, the constant deceit. It's about you destroying everything we built. Scarlett, seeing her ploy failing with Michael, turned her venomous gaze on Eleanor. This is all your fault, she spat, her voice thick with pure hatred. You've always hated me. You're just jealous, old woman, because your son loves me more than you. Just as the words left Scarlett's lips, the doorbell rang again, a jarring interruption in the explosive scene. Eleanor, numb with shock from Scarlett's last accusation, walked slowly to the door and opened it. Standing on her porch was a woman who looked remarkably similar to Scarlett. The same striking eyes, the same elegant bone structure. But in this woman's eyes, there was no malice, only a quiet sadness and a profound kindness. Rebecca, Scarlett breathed, her voice a sudden, choked whisper, her face drained of all color. The word was laced with shock, fear, and a flash of something akin to genuine dismay. The woman on the porch nodded to Eleanor. You must be Eleanor. I'm Charlotte, Scarlett's sister. Eleanor, still processing the name Rebecca and the sudden appearance of a woman who looked so much like Scarlett, could only nod, a silent invitation to enter. Charlotte stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the tense scene, settling on a now silent and stunned Michael. I came, Charlotte said, her voice clear and resonant, carrying an undeniable weight of conviction. Because I couldn't let you do this to another family, Scarlett. Michael stared at Charlotte, his jaw slack with disbelief. He glanced at Eleanor, then back at Scarlett, whose face was a portrait of horror. Another family? He echoed, his voice barely a whisper. Charlotte nodded, her expression grim. This isn't the first time Scarlett has done something like this, Michael. Not by a long shot. It's why we haven't spoken in years. I cut her out of my life after what she did to Robert. Eleanor and Michael exchanged a bewildered look. Robert? Who was Robert? Scarlett had always maintained she had never been married before Michael, that he was her one true love, that her family was a loving, if somewhat distant, unit. Charlotte continued, her voice steady, stripping away Scarlett's carefully constructed facade. Robert was her first husband, a kind, trusting man, like you, Michael. She manipulated him, just like she's been manipulating you. She drained his bank accounts, convinced him to invest in her business ventures that never materialized, and when there was nothing left to take, she left him, penniless and heartbroken. She even used a different last name then to avoid detection. The revelations hit Michael like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, Leo still whimpering in his arms. The woman he had married, the mother of his child, was not who she claimed to be. Her privileged background, her sweet, innocent demeanor, all of it was a lie. Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was worse than she could have ever imagined. Scarlett was a predator, a calculating charlatan who had meticulously built a web of deceit around her son. The atmosphere in Eleanor's living room crackled with the raw electricity of revelation. If you're captivated by this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to hear how this family's truth finally unravels. There's more to come, so don't miss a single part. Charlotte, her eyes fixed on Michael, extended a slim, cream-colored folder. Everything is in here, she said, her voice quiet but firm, a stark contrast to Scarlett's earlier hysteria. The marriage certificate, the divorce papers, the restraining order Robert's family had to take out to keep her away. Michael, his hands trembling, took the folder as if it were a fragile artifact that might shatter at any moment. His gaze was fixed on Charlotte. How did you know to come? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, still reeling from the shock of Scarlett's past. Charlotte glanced at Eleanor, then back at Michael. Eleanor reached out to me on social media. She had a feeling, a deep intuition, after you mentioned Scarlett had a sister she rarely spoke of. It took some digging, but I found her, and I've been tracking Scarlett ever since Robert's downfall. I knew she'd eventually find another victim, another family to prey on. Scarlett, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally found her voice, a strangled cry of terror. "You're all trying to ruin my life, to take my son away from me." Her voice rose in a desperate shriek, the manipulative mask finally crumbling under the weight of Charlotte's undeniable evidence. Michael, despite the maelstrom of emotion swirling within him, retained a surprising calm. He gently tried to reassure her, his voice softer now. "No one is trying to take Leo away, Scarlett. That's not what this is about. But we need to figure out where we go from here. There has to be accountability for everything you've done." Charlotte stepped forward, her expression softening, her voice tinged with genuine concern as she looked at her sister. "Susan," she said, using a name Eleanor and Michael had never heard, a name from a life Scarlett had meticulously buried. "You need help, professional help. This pattern, this cycle of deceit and manipulation, it's destroying your life and hurting everyone around you. It's not just about the money anymore." A brief flicker of fear, perhaps, or even a semblance of remorse crossed Scarlett's face. For a fleeting moment, she looked vulnerable, truly broken. Then, just as quickly, the calculating glint returned to her eyes, her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted. "Fine," she said, her voice hard, devoid of emotion. "You want the truth? Yes, I married Robert for his money. Yes, I've been trying to get control of the inheritance. But can you blame me? Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up with nothing?" Michael looked utterly bewildered. His memories of Scarlett were filled with stories of a well-off family, a privileged upbringing, a life of comfort and aspiration. Her narratives had always painted her as coming from a background not dissimilar to his own, perhaps even grander. Charlotte's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, yet it cut through Scarlett's indignant facade with devastating precision. "She lied about that too, Michael. Our father was a janitor. Our mother worked 3 days cleaning houses just to put food on the table. We grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment, struggling to make ends meet." Scarlett resented it. She always wanted more, no matter the cost. As if sensing the suffocating weight of these truths, Leo, who had grown quiet during Charlotte's revelations, began to cry in earnest, his small body shaking. Michael, without a word, reached out and gently took his son from Scarlett's arms. To Eleanor's surprise, Scarlett yielded without protest, her shoulders slumping, her energy seemingly drained from her. She looked, for the first time, truly defeated. Eleanor, her heart heavy, but also filled with a new kind of relief, whispered her thanks to Charlotte. "Thank you for coming, Charlotte, for everything." Charlotte met her gaze, a profound sadness in her eyes. "I should have found her sooner," she replied, her voice filled with regret. Eleanor looked at Michael, cradling Leo, then at Charlotte, a woman who had bravely stepped forward to expose her own sister for the sake of justice. Despite the chaos, despite the pain, a small, fragile glimmer of hope flickered within Eleanor. Their family, though broken, could rebuild. It could heal, not on a foundation of lies, but on the solid ground of truth, however painful that truth might be. Scarlett, however, was not one to stay defeated for long. She straightened her posture, a hardened glint returning to her eyes. "Nothing happens," she stated, her voice regaining its cold resolve. "We go home and we deal with this privately." She shot a venomous glance at Charlotte, a silent warning. "This is our family business, not hers." Michael, holding Leo close, met Scarlett's gaze, his own eyes now clear and resolute. "I think we're beyond that, Scarlett," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "The lies, the debt, the plans to sell Mom's house. We can't just sweep this under the rug. Not anymore." Scarlett tried one last time to defend herself, her voice a desperate plea for understanding. "They were mistakes, Michael, mistakes I made because I was desperate, because I wanted a better life for us, for our future." Michael's gaze was piercing. "Was Robert for your future too, Scarlett?" Scarlett's eyes flashed, a brief rekindling of her defiant fury. "Robert was different," she insisted, her voice tight with desperation. "He wasn't like Michael. He didn't have a family trying to control." Charlotte interjected, her voice cutting through her sister's flimsy excuse. "You were 28 when you married Robert, Susan. The same age you were when you met Michael. The pattern is painfully clear." Eleanor, who had remained silent for a moment, absorbing Charlotte's words, finally spoke. Her voice was gentle, yet carried an undeniable weight. "We needed to know the truth, Scarlett," she said. "All of it. For Michael, for Leo, and for our family's future." Scarlett's gaze snapped to Eleanor, her eyes narrowing with a bitter accusation. "This is what you wanted all along, isn't it?" she spat, her voice laced with venom. "To drive me away from Michael, to break up our family, to keep your precious son all to yourself, just like you always wanted." Eleanor met Scarlett's hostile gaze without flinching. "No, Scarlett," she replied softly, her voice filled with genuine sorrow. "I wanted Michael to be happy. I wanted to be a part of his life, to know my grandson. That's all I ever wanted." Scarlett turned back to Michael, her eyes welling with calculated tears once more. "I do love him," she insisted, her voice pleading. "I truly do." But Michael, rocking Leo gently in his arms, was no longer swayed. "Do you, Scarlett?" he questioned, his voice devoid of anger, but filled with a deep, weary sadness. "Or do you love what I represent? The security, the inheritance, the comfortable lifestyle you believe you deserve?" Scarlett's face hardened. "You're not leaving me," she threatened, her voice rising. "I won't let you take Leo from me." "I don't want to take Leo from you, Scarlett," Michael clarified, his voice still calm, though his jaw was set. "But there has to be trust, and right now there is none." With an abrupt, decisive movement, Scarlett straightened, pulling her shoulders back. "Fine," she declared, her voice cold. "I'm going home, and I'm not discussing this further with her." She gestured dismissively at Eleanor. "Or her eyes flicking to Charlotte. Present." "I'm staying here tonight," Michael stated, his voice firm, his gaze meeting Scarlett's. "With Leo. We need some time to think." Scarlett's fury flared, but before she could erupt, Charlotte stepped forward, her voice gentle yet insistent. "Susan, please. You need professional help. This isn't about blaming you, it's about breaking a cycle that's hurting everyone, especially you." Scarlett scoffed, dismissing her sister's plea. "Professional help? You're all just trying to gang up on me, to ambush me, to betray me." Michael, still rocking the now quiet Leo, looked at Scarlett, his expression somber. "This isn't the first sign of trouble, Scarlett," he said, his voice measured. "It's the culmination of 3 years of lies, deception, and attempts to isolate me from my family. It's too much to ignore." A heavy silence descended. Scarlett stared at Michael, then at Eleanor, then finally at Charlotte, her face a storm of conflicting emotions. After a long, drawn-out moment, her shoulders sagged slightly. "One night," she conceded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can stay here one night, then we talk. Just the two of us." As she turned to leave, Scarlett stopped at the door, her eyes finding Eleanor's once more, a chilling warning in her voice. "This isn't over, Eleanor. Don't think for a second that you've won." Eleanor simply met her gaze, her voice soft but resolute. "It's not about winning, Scarlett. It's about healing our family. It's about truth." Scarlett scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound, then slammed the door shut behind her, the echo reverberating through the silent house. Her parting shot, muffled by the closed door, was a demand for Michael to return home by noon the next day. Michael let out a shaky breath, finally releasing some of the tension he had held. He looked at Eleanor, then at Charlotte. "So," he began, his voice still a little hoarse. "What now?" Charlotte, ever practical, spoke first. "She needs real help, Michael. This isn't just about financial issues. It's a deep-seated behavioral pattern. But right now, you need to protect yourself, and more importantly, Leo." They talked for hours, meticulously going over the evidence, discussing legal options, and planning for the inevitable custody battle. Eleanor felt a surge of strength having Charlotte by their side, a fierce, unexpected ally. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm in Eleanor's home. She often reflected on the tumultuous events, the painful shattering of illusions. Scarlett had indeed emptied their joint account the morning after Michael stayed with Eleanor, leaving a hastily scribbled note. "You chose them over me. You'll regret this." Then she had disappeared. Her aggressive custody case, launched weeks later, crumbled under the weight of Charlotte's detailed testimony and the overwhelming financial evidence Michael had uncovered. The judge, presented with Scarlett's history of manipulation and deceit, swiftly granted Michael full custody of Leo. A month after that, a postcard arrived from Phoenix. It was from Scarlett. The message was brief. "Starting over, tell Michael I'm sorry, tell Leo I love him." It was a fleeting, almost ghost-like communication, leaving more questions than answers. But it was the last they heard from her. Michael and Leo had moved in with Eleanor. The house, once quiet, now buzzed with the joyful sounds of a baby's laughter and a father's renewed sense of purpose. Michael had started therapy, slowly healing from the emotional wounds. He had reconnected with old friends, rediscovered hobbies, and even started dating again, a kind kindergarten teacher who saw him for who he truly was. Eleanor watched Michael push Leo on the swing in the backyard, their laughter echoing through the garden. The bond between them, once strained, was now stronger than ever, forged in the fires of adversity and rebuilt on a foundation of unwavering love and honesty. The doorbell chimed, signaling the arrival of George, Brenda, and Charlotte for their weekly family lunch. As she walked to the door, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. Gratitude for the truth, however painful. Gratitude for unexpected allies like Charlotte. And gratitude for the new, stronger family they had built, one rooted not in illusions, but in genuine love and unwavering support.